Episode 2 of House of the Dragon, The Rogue Prince, in my view, has kept up the standard the first episode set. While I feel the pace as a whole was a bit slower than last week, I think that's a given when you consider the fewer action sequences in this episode. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. This episode presents an interesting character piece. I feel I know each of these characters a lot better now, and the direction HBO seems to be taking them. I can start to see how they've expanded on what we know of the characters in Fire and Blood, and have made them more three-dimensional. I also feel this episode was a good example of why people fell in love with Game of Thrones as a TV show during Season 1 in its most simple form: political intrigue, family dynamics, and lots of scheming. However, at the same time, I do also feel, in terms of meaningful story progression, it was a bit spread thin in a few places, with a few extra scenes I don't really think were necessary. For example, I think there was a much cleaner way to introduce Criston Cole as a member of the Kingsguard, and honestly, that whole sequence of Rhaenyra choosing the Kingsguard was quite long and could have really been done off screen. I think now I've seen enough of Corlys and Rhaenys to begin to start to form a judgment. With Corlys, there are some elements I really like, and others I feel don't quite work. One thing I think they have nailed is the arrogance and ambition that comes with a self-made man such as the Sea Snake. I get the sense he has a high opinion of himself and thinks a lot of himself. However, the elements I don't think quite work is the simple fact that Corlys, in the books, isn't even at the Small Council. During this time period, he's supposed to be on Driftmark due to the rift between his house and the crown after the Great Council of 101. I get why they've made this change. In order to have some key characters introduced to the audience much earlier, it seems they may have also built up the threat of Kragus Crabfeeder. Again, I guess they need some kind of battle in Season 1, given the timeline it covers, so it makes sense they would expand this. If I recall from the book, it was never even Corlys who suggested a marriage between Laena and Viserys, but a Grand Maester. However, in terms of the TV show, and the need to establish Corlys as a character, it makes sense for him to suggest the marriage, and storm out when rejected. It makes his scheming with Daemon feel much more natural than how the books imply it happened. Again, I think Rhaenys' performance is fine. I really do get the feeling of how bitter and angry she is that she was spurned. However, something I didn't really clock last week is they have set up the Great Council of 101 as a choice between Viserys and Rhaenys, when in reality the choice was only ever between Viserys and the baby Laenor Velaryon. Rhaenys was never in consideration at 101, with her already being passed over in favour of Baelon, Viserys' father, in 92 AC, after the death of her own father, Aemon, with Baelon being named the Prince of Dragonstone over her, despite him being the second son, and Rhaenys being the daughter of the elder. It's clear they're condensing events a bit in terms of the backstory to make it all a bit more digestible, but for me, it makes much more sense for Rhaenys to be bitter about being passed over from Baelon than the Great Council. It's a double whammy in the book. Rhaenys passed over in 92 and her son in 101. That's why both her and Corlys are so bitter by the time we get to the events of the Dance of the Dragons. The scene between Viserys and Laena was very awkward, and in a way, I kind of loved it. It says a lot about Viserys as a character, that despite how good of a match Laena would be, and as a king it would make sense to marry her. And plus, he also had literally every member of the Small Council telling him to marry her. That he said no, picking who he wanted and perhaps loved in Alicent. I like how awkward Viserys seems to be at the concept of marrying a 12-year-old and how much it is hammered home. It's clear that even at this point, Otto's scheming with Alicent was causing him to question his choices. I really liked Rhaenyra in this episode, and I think Millie Alcock's performance in The Sept was fantastic. I was not sold on her casting when she was announced, but she's really won me round, and I will miss her when the time jump happens. Her being friends with Alicent makes Otto's scheming even more impactful, with the sense of betrayal Rhaenyra would feel by her best friend. I really love the dynamic they have created with Rhaenyra and Alicent, and that closeness will make the events to come even more compelling. Like last week, Emily Carey's great as Alicent. She comes across really well as an anxiety-ridden young woman being forced into a situation she perhaps doesn't want by her father. However, watching both Alicent and Viserys' dynamic does make me question exactly how much of Alicent's behaviour is down to Otto, or if she really is genuinely being caring and kind towards Viserys, having developed some kind of feeling towards him. I like that it's not clear and it's open to interpretation. Otto Hightower's role in this episode was marvellously done. and it may be my performance of the week. I love the scheming and blatant manipulation of not only the people around him, but his own daughter. The scenes where Rhaenyra is picking the new Kingsguard and Otto just happens to come along. His approach to Rhaenyra and that scene was fantastic. And hey, maybe he had a hand in getting Kristen Cole selected to the Kingsguard. His scene with Daemon on the bridge at Dragonstone was also great. You really got a sense of the loathing towards Daemon from Otto when having to deal with Daemon. You really get a sense of how much he dislikes the prince. But I think it goes deeper than that. A lot of people fairly questioned why Otto even confronted Daemon, knowing he had 2,000 men and a dragon. He was never going to get him to back down peacefully. The thing is, Otto knew exactly that. He knew the whole act of taking the egg was Daemon clamouring for his brother's attention. He also knew that if Viserys went to deal with Daemon, the king would back down and reconcile with his brother. This is something Otto did not want, not being a huge Daemon fan. So he sent himself over the king, preventing any chance of reconciliation. He went to Dragonstone knowing and planning to fail. He manipulated the situation to further his own purpose. It would be much better for him to return in failure than allow the brothers to reconcile. It's masterful manipulation and scheming of the highest level. Speaking of the egg scene on Dragonstone, I just want to go into the lore in the books behind this event, as it plays out quite differently in the TV show, but I think for a good reason. In the book, when Daemon is banished, he does in fact run off with Mysaria. He also announces his intent to marry her and that she is pregnant. Well, it appears the difference in the book is she really was pregnant, and it was not just Daemon making it up. That's why he took the egg in the book. I also feel I should point out two other little details with this. In Fire and Blood, Daemon did not take a specific egg, so it being Balon's egg in the show was just to cause conflict with Rhaenyra and give her and Daemon more screen time together in order to help build that dynamic. In fact, there is a look Daemon gives Rhaenyra just before he gives the egg back that was phenomenal acting by Matt Smith. He managed to convey in that one look exactly what was going through his head at that moment and gave the viewer a real sense he's up to something and scheming just as much as Otto is. Last little thing I feel is worth mentioning is that this scene just simply didn't happen in Fire and Blood. In the book, we are just told the fact that Daemon took an egg for his mistress, which angered Viserys, and Daemon just gave it back when asked. Again, this is a good case of the show expanding on the bare bones of the book and creating an interesting narrative out of it that helps develop our characters further and build their relationships. I do plan on making a video on the new title sequence from a lore perspective, so look out for that next week. I think this episode was a solid 7 out of 10. Not quite as good as last week, but still a great episode of TV, and it really reminded me of early Game of Thrones.